Hi, everybody. Melissa Richards, Director of Marketing here at 3 Enrollment Marketing. And welcome to our webinar today, Fundraising Rewired, Elevating Giving from Transaction to Relationship and Beyond. Featuring Brian Gawor as our speaker. We're thrilled to have Brian as our Giving Geek in residence here at 3E. This is a new area for us, so you'll learn how we are applying our tested and proven strategies and technologies for enrollment marketing for the giving side. Plus, learn some exceptional best practices for giving along the way. I'm going to hand it over to Brian, but first, a couple of housekeeping details. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function and we'll monitor those and answer your questions along the way. If you feel free to use the chat for comments. And also, if you are interested in learning more, Brian's going to give you some contact information at the end. So thanks so much, and we'll get started in just about 20 seconds or so to give everybody time to fill in.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks behind the scenes to Matt Hames, two great experts here at 3E. Excited to have them partnering today. And welcome, fundraisers. As Melissa said, please don't hesitate throughout the presentation to drop some things in chat. Love when people share examples of your campaigns, and then be very active on the Q&A. I promise I will give you a real answer to your questions, and if I don't know the answer, I will find it and email you tomorrow. Let's kick it off, give you some idea of who I am. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been in the higher education and fundraising fields for about 25 years. And I'm really only here because of donors. Donors funded much of my education at the incredible Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. My family, prior to that, was saved after World War II by donors, priests, Jesuit priests mainly. Generosity is really the only reason I'm sitting here today. So I'd like to tell people that I've basically, over the last 2.5 decades, just been trying to pay those donors back. And I do that by studying how and why people give. And I get to advise causes all over the world. Many higher education institutions over the course of a 15-year career as a consultant, been able to in some way touch about half of U.S. higher education, in some cases very briefly with pals like Sean Shakin here at 3A, looking at donor data, or in some cases building out comprehensive young alumni engagement campaigns, giving day campaigns, and then as a consultant to major capital campaigns. And as Melissa said, I was talking to my friends, Jim and Patricia here at 3E, co-founders, and we really believe that there's an opportunity to take the tested technology that we're using on the enrollment side that's engaging families and students in a very responsive, personalized, emotionally driven, empathetic way to the fundraising field. And I'll tell you a little bit at the tail end of the presentation about that. We're going to focus mostly today on cause adoption and how donors are changing and some of the key strategies. But I'll tell you, this is basically all I think about. So very difficult for people to stop talking about fundraising. That is my actual license plate, says Giving Geek on it. So those are my credentials, and let's have some fun today. So here's what I want to do with y'all today. First, as I said, talk about how donors are changing and how we need to change with them. Some of this is going to be related to things like the experience economy, which I'll unpack a little bit. Some of it's going to be adopting tactics that our donors are experiencing in the commercial world as things like retargeting and responsive communications, come at them on a daily basis. I want to actually talk a little bit about the motivations of donors. Sometimes we move all the way past that. We're in solicitation mode. We're thinking, how many emails should I be sending? How do I text people? What is too much? And we're not thinking about, well, how do donors actually get to this point where they're going to be philanthropic and generous? And I'm going to spend some time talking about both research on high net worth donors, but then also some responses that we've seen to higher education alumni across the spectrum through things like the National Alumni Survey, which I helped create with some of my friends, and my friends have taken over now, and I'll share some results from that. And then I really want to make sure that I leave you with some actionable things you can start with right away. So hopefully you'll pick up through this some key immediate tactics. And again, I'll provide my email address at the end so you can directly ask me questions. And one of the things that I'm going to offer at the end of the presentation here is a 30-minute session to go through things like your giving day, or let's go through your annual giving appeals, or your leadership giving program, or your planned giving program, and just talk about some things that we've seen that are working well. So to kick us off here, Matt is going to launch a poll here. And we just want to know in this poll, which of these strategies are you currently using? So please check all that apply here. So like, do you have a giving day? Do you do, texting, email in a coordinated way on your giving day? Do you happen to automate your messages by donor history? So, do you send automatically different things to donors who have given before versus those who don't? Do you send automated messages by donor interest, right? So does that business college grad really care about medical research? Is that education college grad actually a big fan of the marching band? Like, are you able to see donor interest in your data? Do you have an AI chatbot that answers donors' questions? Okay. And then I want to know, if you happen to have that chatbot, does the chatbot collect information for things like gift officer follow-up? Okay. So we'll wait to see kind of results as they come in there. Give people a little bit of chance to participate. Okay. Matt, you can probably close it now. That'd be fine. I can see kind of here. All right. So what I can see in the poll there is that everybody pretty much has a giving day. But as we started to go down that list in terms of advanced tactics that people are utilizing, especially on the automation side, a little bit less common. Okay. Nobody, there were a couple people there that clicked that they had utilized a chatbot, but nobody clicked the button, as far as I could see there, in the collects information for gift officer follow-up. And that's a really interesting thing that I found, is that just about every website today has some form of automated chatbot. One of the things we can talk a little bit later about is, does that AI usage have a real core of empathy? Is it just a question answer, or does it have a core of empathy? And is it actionable for your team to follow up on? Let's just give you a little teaser of some of the things that we're going to talk about as we go on this quest to kind of rewire fundraising. All right. So first, let's start with, why does it matter? And I bet just about everybody on this webinar knows about this concept, and it is the great wealth transfer. And it is at least 100 trillion. Some estimates have said 124 trillion. It continues to grow as assets accumulate and grow. But there's a lot of money coming from the baby boom generation, right? While this is happening, it is absolutely true that trust in institutions, including higher education, is declining rapidly. And this comes from the Pew Trust Index, other polls that we see out there. So people are less trusting by default of an institution. One example of this is that we see with particular millennials and Gen Z, less trust and less attendance to a house of worship, but a significant involvement, engagement in faith-based activities and faith-based missions. Okay. So it's not that Americans have become less generous. Okay. And I talk about this all the time with my friend Nathan Chappell, who wrote Generosity Crisis. It's not that humans have become less generous. We're just doing things in less formal ways. And trust, in an era when it's hard to figure out what's actually true, is creeping into the philanthropic enterprise. Okay. This massive amount of money that is in the baby boom that is going to move to Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, and we're going to break down some characteristics by generations. On average, in previous historical periods, about 6% of that has gone to nonprofits or charity. We think that there's a chance, some friends and I, that it may be greater than 6% that will come to nonprofits, charity, higher education, houses of worship. And that's because the wealth is so concentrated that people are actually running out of things to buy. And I know many of you have kept track of things like the Giving Pledge, where we see people like Mackenzie Scott, the Zuckerbergs, saying, Warren Buffett saying they're going to give away the bulk of their wealth during their lifetime. Okay. This is a game changer, right? Because traditional philanthropy, the transformative gifts over the years, have often come after people have passed. They probably had a relationship with the causes that they gave to in many cases. But today's big donors want to work with us while they're still here. Okay. One of the key points that I wanted to make to everybody here is that this is not a future thing. This is not a thing we are planning for. It is happening right now. We are amidst the great wealth transfer. And within 15 years, there will be almost no baby boomers alive. So a baby boom does also, down the road, create a death boom. And that will change the structure of the American economy. So many institutions are setting records for gifts. Okay. And I generally tell people that if you're going into a comprehensive campaign, you should expect to set a record on your last campaign every time you do a new campaign. And it's because of these wealth demographics. It's also important to recognize that when we talk about the wealth transfer happening over about the next 15 years, everyone on this webinar today has a maximum of about 2 more full campaigns in them before the wealth transfer ends. So the time is now for us to really be better engaging donors. So we might start to ask, why do the biggest donors give? And this comes from the Bank of America High Net Worth Study. We put this out at least every 2 years. And they asked high net worth donors, these are donors with a net worth of over $1 million, why do you give? And what's intriguing about this is what we're seeing is that it really comes down to a lock-in with people's specific values, their meaning and purpose, and their interest in the area. Okay. They also very highly rate their firsthand experience with the organization. And I'm going to show you a chart of the percentage of high net worth donors that volunteer. And just so you know, it's higher than the average Americans. Okay. So really big for donors is this idea of an alignment with their values. Okay. We're trained as fundraisers. I'm going to go back to the 2021 study here for a second. Okay. And this is that same study. They asked the questions a little bit differently. They said, what are your motivations? How you're likely to respond? And we're trained as fundraisers when we're asked the question, why do people give? We're trained to say, because they were asked. And what I can tell you is that officially that's over. High net worth donors are saying that the reason why they're giving is a belief in the mission of organization, the idea that the gift can make a difference for their enjoyment and satisfaction. It's an experience, right? And then, of course, it's community, right? Okay. Tax benefits are in there, and there's some significant charity positive, I believe, tax changes for this year, actually starting this year and then into next year. But just so you know, the research that we have, no tax benefit has ever caused someone to be philanthropic. It absolutely can impact the amount and the timing of gifts, but a tax benefit is more of a nudge on sort of causing it to happen, when really it's going to be the things above that you see there on the list that motivates donors. Okay. So the idea with your biggest donors is that you're locking into their mission, their personal values. You're helping them understand that they can make a difference. This is a very active and engaged process with them. And they're not giving just because they asked. Okay. In fact, what we see in that same Bank of America research is the idea that high net worth donors really become giving experts over time. So they actually know the giving vehicles. They know how to rank and rate charities. They have preferences for things that nonprofits, higher education institutions do. Okay. And they're really good at giving, to the point that the fundraisers are less often now an expert than a collaborator and a partner. And I'm teasing a little bit my final point of the webinar, but this is what it means to rewire our brain. It's not just about endlessly pinging alumni and canvassing, because what we know is that the biggest motivators are going to be belief in the mission, confidence, right, and helping the community. Okay. And that comes through in the statistics from that same study about the volunteer rate of high net worth donors. Hey, now, sometimes I've heard people say before, um, well, we hear from some donors, I give with my time, not my money. What I can tell you is that we're increasingly seeing that when people are making the biggest gifts, they're also giving of their time, their influence, their network, and their volunteers. Okay. So in your database, if you're not seeing at least 3 to 4 times the participation rate in giving and a significantly higher average gift for your volunteers, you should look at that critically and think about how you can engage them better. Maybe talk to them. Should we be talking to you more about giving? Right. Definitely a case that you should be using wealth screening and other identification tools that you have available to determine which of your volunteers are philanthropic in the world outside of your organization and who you might be able to engage with high capacity, because your biggest donors are also volunteering. Okay. We see as well too this interesting shift with younger donors and social influence. So this is from the Giving USA special report on giving by generations. And what we see is that younger donors are about twice as likely to be influenced by social media than older donors. Now, this is a specific question about people who ask on social media. Okay. We can go all the way back to things like the Ice Bucket Challenge. But I know many of you also on your giving days and in other programs have social media ambassadors that post and help you make the case or to gain attention for those campaigns. And we're going to find that that's really powerful for these generations that are about to inherit this incredible wealth. Okay. This is a great study, by the way. Giving USA is an excellent thing for you to invest in. It's not a particularly expensive subscription. It comes out in July every year, but they do special reports. And this is a special report of giving by generation. Okay. So let's take a look at the National Alumni Survey. Okay. And this is a survey that was created, and I helped at the beginning create it, and it's been taken over by two friends now, Howard Heavner and Sarah Kleberger, who do an incredible job with it. They will, by the way, in March here, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, announce that they've received over 100,000 responses to the survey. So this is last year's survey. You'll get the full results of the next one coming up in just a few weeks here, and we'll write a blog on it at 3E and be sure to share that with you. But this is direct responses from the alumni to their alma mater. So these messages were sent out by their alma mater, and then the survey results come in. It's the largest survey of alumni on philanthropy that's ever been created. By the way, it's not anonymous. So one of the neat things about this survey is that you actually get to see what individual donors said. And so you make a pledge to be private in those results, but it's not anonymous. Really, really awesome. Done some great things over the years where we've asked donors, do you care about social justice? And some percentage of donors say that's really high in my priorities. Well, you can then go to those donors and send out really social justice forward communications without any fear of alienating them, right? Because they've told you that they particularly care about that. That's a really interesting way to rewire your fundraising, which is literally ask donors what they care about and send them communications based on what they said they cared about. This is an example of the sort of thing that, in terms of versioning of emails and things like that, that 3E could be really helpful with. So 81% of college graduates in the survey say that being philanthropic is important. This is not shocking. We've known for years that people who have a college degree are more likely to be philanthropic in the world. It's about civic engagement. There's a lot of other factors that come in play, right? But what we can see is that, unfortunately, the alma mater is not necessarily at the top of the list, okay? And interesting as well, too, to see that volunteering number for the alma mater is relatively low, okay? The same types of questions. What is important when deciding to donate? Okay. So again, impacting things that you care about, passion about what you're being asked, right? Belief that the gift will actually matter, right? Has there been a great story told about the impact of giving? Okay. The alma mater showing how the gift was utilized, Then, really interesting in this survey data, what we found is that there's two things that seem to coincide with the chance that someone is either giving or indicating that they would be willing to make a very large gift. Okay. And that's satisfaction with their experience when they were a student and their current sense of connection. And those two seem to really combine. So the number one thing that institutions can do to lead to future donations by alumni is just provide an incredible student experience. Okay. Secondly, the ways in which we allow alumni to feel connected. That's going to be everything from the alumni events you do, the volunteering, of course, because we see this stat that 72% of the alumni who gave more than $10,000 were active volunteers. Absolutely incredible, right? Really countering that idea that the biggest givers' time is so valuable, they don't have time to volunteer. They just give money. It's not true. It's just not true, okay? But that sense of connection that you're able to provide in your outreach. So what I often tell people when I go to an advancement office and sit down for a day and kind of talk about how they're engaging donors is that everybody in the operation is a fundraiser, because the ways that your alumni engagement team, the ways that your athletics program, okay, the way that your volunteer programs, career services, all those ways they interface with alumni is going to help build that sense of connection. Okay. So providing a great experience, a sense of connection is crucial. Very interesting as well, too, we've started to see in some data that if you can, so maybe alumni had some issues with their experience. They're critical of their student experience. If you can provide a sense of connection, we actually see people rephrase their experience post hoc. One of the greatest examples of this is one of my favorites, and it was so great to get to meet him with my daughter some years back, John Mulaney, who some of you may know, and one of his Netflix specials posted a rant about how his alma mater had asked him for money. Well, they just engaged him, and his fellow alumni and comedians did a benefit, and they raised over $1 million. So he went from nationally making fun of annual fund solicitations to raising over $1 million for first-gen students. And that's because of the connection that was made by the institution. Okay. You can just look up John Mulaney fundraiser and you'll see it. Okay. It is important to recognize that the economic factors are going to really weigh. So the biggest predictor of total giving in the US is the trajectory of the S&P during the last quarter of the year. And it's pretty good this past year. We're back in kind of tariff zone right now. There's a little uncertainty. But you can see on a graph that giving seems to kind of outpace even, but absolutely tie ebb and flow with the S&P. Okay. Yes, that includes people giving away appreciated stock, but it's just a really good bellwether of the economy and the willingness for high net worth donors to make a gift. Okay. So to kind of go through and just talk for a second about what I've laid out. The giving world is changing. Okay. So today's donors, again, are experts on locking in their meaning and purpose. They're more likely to use strategic vehicles like donor advised funds, family foundations. Really interesting trend there. When people are using DAFs, they're finding nonprofits through Charity Navigator, they're asking their friends. Fundraisers are less of the fulcrum in that. Not to say fundraisers are unimportant, but today's donors, and particularly experienced philanthropists, are relatively independent in their giving, including the vehicles that they utilize. Okay? So that's increasing, that purpose-driven strategic giving. What's declining, again, when we go back to that trust issue, is alumni are just way less likely to give out of, loyalty, expectation, guilt, okay? And that loyalty and that expectation of giving really actually drove a lot of philanthropy in several generations prior. Today's giver is strategic and a giving expert, okay? And that should change the way we look at fundraising. All right. I want to remind you that you are 100% welcome to ask questions at any time. Melissa, if you can help me out, if I don't see a question, please just ask me to pause, and I'll do that at any time. And then feel free to put in chat if there's anything that you're noticing that's going on. Okay. What this all lines up to is the idea that giving is an experience. Okay. And of course, the record setting Eras tour, right behind it, Coldplay's tour, Taylor Swift setting an absolute record for tickets, right? This is where people are putting their money. Take a look at examples of the incredible Savannah Bananas, who have taken a sport that honestly I think is kind of boring, baseball, sorry, baseball fans, and made it an event, right? You got people chasing a banana around on the field, they're singing, they're dancing, really cool stuff, right? So changing even the way we look at sporting. Take a look at what young people are doing, scrolling through miles and miles of video content, right? Every day. And it's quick, right? We know on the enrollment side, for example, that the vast majority of graduate students will attend the first graduate program that contacts them back. We've seen this in a pattern where an MBA student goes on, usually late at night, and emails 3 programs. I think the stat is like 85% will go to the school that gets to them first, okay? Because it's feeling wanted, right? Also, probably the case that those institutions, and we could make a corollary on the giving side, are really on top of their game in terms of looking at current interest. Can't tell you how many times I've heard from a major donor. I get to hang out with some of them that they thought about giving to an organization and they just didn't call them back, or they didn't notice them. Okay, and the data that drives what we do, down to Starbucks, knowing your favorite drink order, pushing you notifications and things like that when you're close to a location, noticing that you've fallen off and haven't purchased in a while. That responsive technology is really part of this experience. And no one knows that better than Taylor Swift. I kind of go back to her right now. And, really interesting story where her dad, Scott, walked $100,000 checks out to the Teamster truckers who had helped them on the tour. They had been with them 24 weeks. And there is often a bonus on a successful tour that's given. It's between $5,000 and $10,000. And she 10x'd that for her drivers. And Scott, her dad, had the experience of going out and people were paying off their houses with this money. Okay. And in total, in optional bonuses that she was not legally or contractually required to give, Taylor Swift issued over $158 million in bonuses during her tour. Taylor Swift is not concerned about amassing wealth. She is there for the art, for the experience, to own her music, to express herself, to engage fans, right? And she is now a billionaire because of that attitude. This is how the world is changing. Philanthropy is actually very tied with people's success in the world, their engagement, and their happiness. I can tell you that we know from experience in social science research that if you can engage a donor over 50 with meaning and purpose, they'll actually live 8 years longer. So sometimes we'll say, Gawor, the stuff that you talk about is kind of creepy. You're like doing a lot of behavioral nudges. You're doing a lot of data stuff behind the scenes here. It's just a little manipulative. Well, when we help people find their meaning and purpose, they're actually happier and they live longer. Okay. All right. So we're going to try now, Matt. I want to tee this up. I don't know if it's possible because the way you put the other poll out. Is it possible for us to ask a question just about like where people have been asked to grow? Okay. So what is your leadership asking you to grow? Are they asking you to grow annual giving? Are they asking you to grow giving day? Is it about leadership giving? A huge driver of revenue in higher education. Is it plan giving? Is there a discussion of, okay, hey, we see this wealth transfer. We need to kind of get on this. Okay. All right. Okay. And so I'm seeing people respond here. And interestingly, even just a couple of years ago, when I would ask this question in webinars, I wouldn't see a lot of people clicking plan giving. I'm seeing a lot of that right now. I'm seeing a lot of major gifts. Okay. So that's great. Great to see that. And thanks for responding there. We can go ahead and close the poll there, Matt. I'll move on here. And thank you for that. So why do donors actually give? Okay. If you're up for it, I'd be happy to give you a massive oversimplification of social science, but something that I think you might be able to use. Some of you may have heard this from me before. It's really interesting to think about the psychology of donors in the moment when we're thinking about offering them a chance to give. And I break this down into 4 types of giving. So this is about where the donor is at in terms of their cause adoption, what they know about the cause and the institution. Okay. And so the first level of this is transactional donors. Okay. So these are going to be donors who are giving very quickly. Classic example of a transactional donor in the US is giving at a checkout. I don't even know how many times I've given at a checkout in the last few years. I probably couldn't even tell you the nonprofits that I supported. Okay. I pretty much mostly say yes to it. Okay. Think about those people who made a first gift on your giving day. Think about those people who you did an alumni event in a city, maybe it was a raw 5K or something like that, and they signed up and they raised a little money for the run. But they couldn't necessarily tell you what the institution is doing with the funds or why philanthropy matters. They might say something like scholarships. It might be, pretty elementary in what they'd say. Okay. So these are people who are making the giving decision very quickly, and they might not even know, what the impact is. Over time, there's going to be a connection with those donors who give again. Maybe this is people who actually give through their network. And we know, for example, that volunteer solicitations, when a peer, and I suggest that your volunteers open the door and that you do solicitation, but that volunteers tee up a conversation and open doors for you, that those gifts are often bigger and much more sticky because everything that we do is social is more likely to happen and bigger. Okay. So it can also be the case that donors have a relationship with you because they're personally impacted. And in university associated medical research outfits, we see that where donors are literally calling up because a child has faced some health issues or a spouse has faced some health issues. And one of the ways that they deal with that is to say, I want to make a difference in terms of a cure and treatment here. Okay. So people might actually come in at the relationship level, but these are the individuals who could tell you a little bit about why they're giving and what the impact is. And on the lifestyle donors, what I'll ask you is, do you have anyone who calls you and said, hey, I can't remember, did I get my gift in this year? They would be mortified to not be on the list. Okay. The dean expects their gift, right? So they've bought into giving as a lifestyle. These are the people who become leadership donors and stick to it. They make multi-year pledges. Okay. This is also where we see people engage as volunteers. Okay. Because they're, giving of their time and energy. And we see that that's associated, as I mentioned before, with bigger gifts. And then we've got that group that many of you clicked on, major and planned givers. Okay. The transformative givers. Okay. So these are the people who are taking that wealth distribution leap. Okay. I will tell you that the biggest mistake being made in higher education fundraising and what we need to rewire is that we provide the wrong behavioral incentives to where people are at. Okay. So let's talk about what some of those behavioral incentives might be. Okay. At the transactional level, the most important thing is for you to make giving easy. Okay. I can't believe how many times I've seen higher education institutions go out there and, they do a great job talking about their giving day. And when people go to give, it's like really hard to give. It's not a great giving page. Okay. For your transactional donors, you're going to lose them if it's hard to give. This is also the place where you emphasize that urgency, that deadline, your crowdfunding campaigns, which should never be more than 90 days. Your giving day, your challenges that you have during the day, really cool stuff that we're seeing people do. Those are really powerful, particularly at the front end of this cause adoption. Okay. Then at the relationship side, what you want to do is really boost that social engagement. This is where you want to have them engaged by peers, messages coming out from fellow alumni, showing your tangible results and mentioning their part in reaching those results. Adrian Sargent some years ago did a really incredible study with NPR donors where it found that the key words were donors like you. So literally, if the words donors like you were used when people called in to give to NPR, the gifts were over 30% bigger and the effect lasts for 2 to 3 years. Because simply placing giving in a social environment makes it, again, more sticky and more likely to happen. Okay. This is the point, by the way, with your volunteers who have just started, that you really need to tell them what to do. Okay. A big mistake that people make early in cause adoption is they get a group of volunteers on board and they say, hey, everybody, what do you think we should do? When a volunteer is just starting, they need like real specific tasks. This is why you do things like write social media posts for them. They can change them and add their own flair, but you make it really easy for people to do their volunteer activities. Okay. Then we move into those people again who are bought in, the lifestyle givers. This is where you want to really emphasize the elite VIP experience. And what I tell people is for their leadership donors, one of the best things you can do if you have a monthly newsletter for your college program, even for the broader college or university, send it to your leadership givers 2 to 3 days early. You don't have to really do anything to it other than just put a banner across the top for the President's Society. Maybe do a little intro for them, thanking them for being the President's Society. The fact that those donors have that information 2 to 3 days earlier than their classmates is incredibly powerful because it's building on one of the biggest currencies that we see, particularly with millennial and Gen Z donors, which is FOMO. Okay. So it costs you nothing to segment out your list and send it a couple days earlier to your leadership group, and really powerful because maybe they work with some alumni, or maybe they're going to go see some alumni, or go out to a game or something, because they hang out with their fellow alumni. Now they know first. Really cool stuff. This is, by the way, the point with your volunteers where you do get them into the room and you say, give us some advice on what we should do. How should we craft this program? Can you help us write the messages? Because people are farther along in their cause adoption. And then on the transformative side, the most important thing for you to do is to ask big questions that lock into that purpose and meaning, and then just shut up and listen. And it's one of the hardest things. I remember sitting with my dean. So we're going to ask a big question here. What is most meaningful to you? What do you want to do? How do you want to leave a legacy? And buddy, you can't talk. And it's excruciating because as fundraisers, of course, we want to fill that silence. But when we allow donors to phrase things in their own words, we're moving people along from an outside motivation to an inside motivation. And there's some incredible research on this. Russell James at Texas Tech actually putting donors in a functional MRI and showing the areas of their brain that activate when they think about big legacy gifts. And it's actually really a first-person narrative. Okay, you can tell I get excited about this science stuff. All right, so that's a kind of overview of the research out there about how people actually adopt causes. And I hope I gave you at least a couple things that you can do in terms of nudges there. Okay. It's also really interesting to think about our donors living in some interesting economies. So at 3E here, we've really embraced this idea of the experience economy. And I was talking to my colleagues here, and I came up with two other ones: the attention economy and the purpose economy, based on some of that research we just talked about. So when we talk about an economy, what we're talking about is the opportunity for donors to make decisions with scarce resources. That's what economy is about. That's what economic policy is about. In the attention economy, there's so much coming at our donors, right? There's so much coming at our supporters. We're cutting through kind of the noise. How do we stand out, right? And this is absolutely critical for engaging new audiences. One of the big ways that we found that we're able to do this at 3E is to really personalize the communications to what we know donors are interested in. But it is also about relevance and speed. One of the things we do, for example, on the admission application side, is if a student does a thing, we're sending them a follow-up email within an hour. Okay. We've even done a thing where we can detect the students that are applying from the same school and send a note to other students saying, this college or university is trending. Really cool stuff to really get people's attention. A message like, this Giving Day challenge is trending is going to get opened at a much higher rate than just a general update on a giving day, right? So that's the attention economy. You got to really be thinking about how do you get donor attention, and sending the same stuff to everybody is not going to do it. Okay? Then we got to really think about what is that giving experience. Okay, seeing giving days, you can make a gift in as quick as 30 seconds. Okay, how is the giving personalized and transparent? How are donors seeing where their gift matters, and how are you helping build trust? Okay, seeing some really cool, gift premiums. You don't have to give away stuff to get money, by the way, but gift premiums that are actually experiences. And one of the things that we've absolutely seen is, remember those mailing labels we used to send out, nonprofits used to send out to people, return address labels? Well, please don't do those anymore. I know there's probably a direct mail provider that's very unhappy with me saying that, but please stop doing that. What you should be focusing on is things is like mobile phone decals for the back of the phone. Okay. Because again, that's not a thing as much as it is an experience showing your pride in your alma mater, right? That's the direction we want to go. I remember University of Texas, Austin, years back had this incredible orange carabiner that they gave out, and it was in the shape of the state. You could only get it if you gave to a specific campaign. Seeing Virginia Tech some years back with my friend Heather Kopak, allowing alumni to vote on the fashion students' design for socks, and then getting a pair of socks if you gave by a certain date. Okay. By the way, that campaign is not about socks. It's about the experience. Okay. That's what we're talking about here. And then I want to go back in the final economy to just talk about purpose. So again, it is not this idea that we have some great things that we want to do and we're going to pitch them to you. It's the idea that donors and families and high net worth families have really locked into specific purpose and meaning. And we're going to show how we're meeting that purpose and meaning. Okay. And so your clarity of your mission is key. The biggest campaigns that we've seen in higher education have very distinct 3 to 5 pillars. And the biggest donors could probably tell you them by the end of the campaign. They're really locked into that purpose. So you're fighting for your piece of each of these economies with each of your donors. And the degree to which that you can do that, you're going to see success. And that's because of a key psychological component, which is that we are in the business. When we talk about transformative gifts, and over half of you clicked on major and planned gifts as a priority, we are not making a pitch to donors. We are helping them move from an outside extrinsic motivation, like pinging you for gifts, treating, unfortunately, donors like an ATM. We can't do that. And moving them to an inside shared and understood motivation. And that's what you see in that, the choices made in those economies and that 4 types of giving. Donors are really moving to a first person personal buy-in. Okay. So how are you going to do that? Okay. I'll give you some ideas. The first is you've got to make it easy to give. Okay. An absolute benchmark for quick challenge gifts on your giving day. Can donors give in less than a minute? And that's going to be things like integrated digital wallet, making sure that people can give through very easy means. It's also going to be paring down your giving page and maybe not trying to collect as much information in a quick campaign like that you normally would. It may cause you to have to do a little bit of work on the back end, but really trying to get your giving day giving to under a minute is pretty crucial. I would see that as a benchmark. In the US, it takes about a minute to buy something. So because we are not giving donors a thing, because we're giving them the joy of giving, locking in on their meaning and purpose, we should probably be trying to do better than the commercial world. And unfortunately, that's not what we see. Okay. How many of you have been to a middle school band concert? Some of you have probably gone through it. And what does it sound like? Well, people are just learning to play. They're learning to play together. You can be very proud of your kid, and I'm, of course, proud of mine. But it's a little bit difficult to get through, right? Totally different the experience that you have in a symphony, where there's an incredible piece of music that's being conducted. Everyone's a professional musician, And there's a synchronization that occurs, kind of a surround sound. Okay. And what we can tell you from research is that if you can move from the middle school band, like disconnected emails, direct mail that appears out of nowhere, lack of follow up, no texting or even voicemail, okay, to a synchronization, right, where things are kind of working together, you can see up to a 30% boost in your response from donors. And that's because you're in that, again, in that attention economy, cutting through, right? And what that takes is really working these channels smartly together, okay? Being responsive in your communications, using some things that you might not know about. I mean, it is possible to leave voicemails for people and the phone doesn't even ring. So they've got a message from maybe even a campus celebrity or somebody who's noteworthy in the alumni base, and it's coming right to their voicemail. Really neat stuff. And we, of course, see this working really well on the enrollment side, but linking those up, okay? And what we've learned at 3E is that sort of synchronized communication really takes things from a disconnected experience to helping donors feel really connected, again, which was a huge motivator of giving that we saw in the National Alumni Survey. Being seen, right? Because hey, they're clearly seeing my preferences because they know that I've given to this place before. They're sharing with me my giving history, right? Confidence, right? Because they're seeing, for example, on a giving day, multiple challenges being met, a total building, right? All these things we do in our program. And it leads to sort of meaningful giving. And we saw with an institution last year a really, really cool boost in results when we did that, right? So that synchronized communication, we've actually seen work really, really well. We've seen for years it working on the enrollment side, but as we start to move further and further into the fundraising world, we're very confident that it's absolutely going to work. Okay. Now, the other thing is AI. And I imagine many of you have experimented with AI and you're present in your work with AI. Okay. That AI needs to be focused on the idea of enhancing human relationships, not replacing them. And I've lost some friends with this opinion as well, too. I actually don't believe that we should be using autonomous avatars to fundraise directly with donors. I love the idea of avatars answering questions and being of service to donors. But I don't think that AI should be used to replace humans. So what's really interesting that we found on the enrollment side is empathy is crucial, okay? So answering questions for a donor, like, how do I include the institution in my will? Like, you can use the following language, blah, 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 blah. How about, Brian, thank you so much for asking that question. I know that where you're going to leave your legacy is a big decision, and we really appreciate that the university is being considered. Let me get you that information. And here it is. And by the way, Brian, would you be willing to give me your contact information so we can have a member of the advancement team follow up, making sure that your legacy goes to the area that you really want to support and that we can thank you is really important to us. Okay. Best anecdote that I can tell you about our AI is that I joined the company in December and they gave me the test version. And the test version is a university that has a fictional mascot that's a narwhal. And of course, I'm mean because I've worked in AI and I try to break it. And I say, well, I'm just here because I think narwhals are cool and I'm a great juggler. This is what RA responded with. Brian, I'm glad you're interested in narwhals. Do you know about our marine science program? And here's the funding. And then the next message was, Brian, because you're a juggler, you probably have the patience to be a good scientist. Empathy, right? So really starting to get into AI 2.0. So we have these tools that are available. Several of you clicked that you have a chat bot. But can we start to use these AI tools when they're answering a question for a donor at 2 a.m. in the morning? One, with empathy that builds on that donor experience. But two, allows our team to then come and follow up for the leadership gift to answer further questions and show that we really care and that you're connected. This is the future of AI use in fundraising. That's how we're going to rewire things. Okay. Another thing that's really powerful is just telling stories. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to an advancement shop and they say, well, we just don't have pictures of that. We just don't have those stories. So we have actually a great program we've used many times on the admission side, and that's social influencer. Okay. And this is Bella and the team. Bella's incredible. Go out and actually take the pictures that you need to tell your giving story. I saw a lot of emails over the holidays that had pastoral photos of the campus. And those pastoral photos, those overhead shots with the snowy campus, they can evoke some level of emotion with many alumni, but they don't really lead to action on the donor side. What we can see when we do things like depict students and faculty interacting, students out in the field in educational environments, students volunteering and making a difference, we really see donors lock into that meaning and purpose. Because again, what donors are telling us is that they care much less about the brand or the logo, and they care about where their gift is going to make a difference. Okay. So that's kind of an overview of some of the tactics that seem to work. And I'll ask Melissa, do you have, are there questions that have come in so far?
No questions yet. Please
Okay.
post your
Okay.
questions in the Q&A and we'd be happy to take them.
Okay. I did get a friend who texted me who's on the webinar who asked me directly, when should we be talking about planned giving? And this is an interesting concept, that wealth transfer that we were talking about, right? Coming from the baby boom to the other generations. The average age of a planned gift commitment in the US is in people's 40s. I think it's 47. Last time I looked at Delta Research, I'll have to check on that. But it's pretty early, okay? And it's not necessarily always a will. I mean, it could be, a plan, an insurance policy, things like that. I would say that in general, if you're talking about planned giving, you want to be programming that with donors in their mid 40s, at least to some degree, including it in content. Of course, you want to program sort of later to the donors who are at that decision point. And absolutely, when donors are approaching the age of 70 and a half, technically with the IRS, and 72, and I'm sure some of you are like, oh, he's going to talk about IRAs. Yeah, so the IRA qualified distribution for an individual, $108,000, or a couple, $216,000 a year. Has to be given directly to the nonprofit. And if you model out somebody giving part of their IRA, and at 72, that includes their minimum distribution that they're required by the government. They may not really want to make that. They may not want to pay taxes on that. But if they're giving that to the nonprofit up to $216,000 tax-free, modeled out from when they started contributing to that IRA, usually in their late 20s, early 30s, they're getting about 4x on their money. Okay, so that's an example on the planned giving side of really working as a strategic partner with donors. Okay, all right. So the point that I've been trying to make with people, and if some late questions come in, that's absolutely no problem. But I did want to answer that planned giving one, is that we've really got to start thinking differently about even the words we use in fundraising. We are often thinking of ourselves as convincers. That's the C word, convince. We're going to convince donors to give. With today's donors, I hope I've shown through this research that we're going to be more successful if we're thinking about ourselves as collaborative with them and meeting their purpose, connecting them. Remember, that was one of the top reasons that caused alumni to give. Consultants, like how can we help you with that IRA? How can we make a plan, a multi-tiered plan for your giving to help meet your mission? And how do we make it easy? How can we be a concierge? Maybe that's on the AI side. Maybe that's on how we do our giving pages, but being helpful to donors. So those C words are the ways that we really should rewire ourselves. Okay? And that was kind of the final point I wanted to make. I'm going to give you two things now that we can offer you here at 3E. I just want to thank you for your time on the webinar, but I want to give you two things that we are offering. One is we have integrated the iPads database that tracks the stats for people and their fundraising. Okay, and actually even gone in and made calculations on how operating expenses would actually apply to your budget. So we have a database, comparative database that you can put your institution in and compare to different cohorts in your state, in your type of institution, public, private, selectivity levels. and see how your fundraising compares. And we're doing that on a per student FTE basis. So really kind of neat data. And 3E is happy to offer you that at no cost, very powerful data in our iPads Explorer. And all you have to do after the webinar is email me, and Melissa will make sure that you have my contact information as well. So just brian.gawor@3enrollment.com, and we can get you set up in that database. Would love to get you that comparative data for your institution. The neat thing about that data is that it's federally sort of regulated and mandated. So it's a little bit different than case data, and it's in there for almost all institutions. I can help you out if you're a separately incorporated foundation and you're not reporting to iPads. I can give you some custom data work on that as well too. But that comparative data might be something that your team might really want as you talk about strategy. The other thing that I would love to do is meet with any of you on any of those topics that you chose. Giving Day, annual giving appeals, leadership, major plan giving. Let's do 30 minutes. Let me ask you some questions that I've learned to ask that can be really helpful. So there we go. It's an update from Matt. But I would love to give you a 30-minute session where we just kind of talk through some of these issues, hear from you about your key goals, but just email us and I'd be happy to set that up with you. So that's how it is. That's the way I see fundraising being rewired. And 3E is prepared to use our tested, empathy-driven technology to help make that happen for you and your donors. We're real excited about it. We've already had some experience with some institutions, and it's been very successful, as I showed. And we're real excited about bringing this approach into the advancement world. We think it's going to be a significant game changer. And just as I said, it's important for us to change with our donors because the time is now. The wealth transfer is underway, and we've all got about 15 years to rewire things if we're going to be successful. So thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'll hand it off to Melissa for final thoughts.
Thank you so much, Brian. I learned so much from you, something new every single time I see you present. So thank you. And for everyone else, you see Brian's email. I encourage you to reach out to him. And if you'd like to learn more from 3 Enrollment, we have a whole library of of webinars that we recorded over the past couple of years. Feel free to browse those, 3enrollment.com. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.